Welcome back to my channel. My name is Nichelle, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 things that helped me write my debut novel, Haunt Me Then. So if you haven't seen the video where I talk about how I got my book deal, I will link it in the cards. I don't know which direction they're in. I pointed to the wrong side last time. I don't remember which side I pointed to, so I can't, correct that mistake. This is descriptive, not prescriptive. So these are 5 things that I found helpful. Hopefully they'll be helpful for you, but if they're not, sorry. The first thing that I found super helpful as I was writing Haunt Me Then, my debut novel, was I really wanted to kind of learn more about the craft of writing. I didn't take any creative writing classes in high school, in college. I took one English class my entire college experience, which was called Women, Literature, and Murder. And it was a great time, but I didn't really learn a lot about kind of like composition and writing. So I've read a lot of books in my life. The basics of like writing nonfiction, but writing fiction was something I'd never really been exposed to. So I wanted to educate myself, and a couple of things that I found super helpful. The first thing is a free lecture series that is available on YouTube that Brandon Sanderson did, writing science fiction or fantasy, but honestly I think it would be applicable to anyone who's writing like commercial fiction. It's like a college course that he teaches at BYU, and he films it and also posts it on YouTube, and I found it to be extraordinarily helpful, especially when we're kind of talking about the framework of building a story. So getting into plot and kind of building your characters out and those kind of fundamental building blocks of structuring a really solid story. I feel like his course did such a great job of kind of going through and teaching you about just like the basic structure of what a fiction story should look like. It was outstanding. And like I said, it's totally free on YouTube. I think there's like 15-ish episodes, and they're each like an hour long. And I think all of them are really valuable. I've heard a lot of people skip over the short story one because it's a guest lecture and they're not writing short stories, but I found that one super helpful too. So if you are going to do that, that would be my tip to you. I found him like super valuable. The other lectures that I did was I did get myself a masterclass subscription last year. Masterclass is like $120 a year, so it is a little bit more expensive, certainly than Brandon's lecture series, which is free. But I bought it for myself because I was really sad after I finished A Little Life, and so I bought it for myself as retail therapy. But I did find it super useful. I watched a lot of the writing videos, like kind of topic by topic piecemeal, but 2 like full lecture series that I found extraordinarily helpful were Neil Gaiman's masterclass and Margaret Atwood's masterclass. Neil Gaiman's, I found his way of talking about character and like tone and description, and especially theme, I found like super helpful and super impactful. His was the first one I watched, and then I watched Margaret Atwood's, and I loved the way she talked about POV. The way she talked about POV changed the way I wrote Haunt Me Then. Like fundamentally changed that story, and I think made it into what it is today. I loved both their lecture series. Those 2 were probably my favorites. I also watched some of N.K. Jemisin's. Hers is a little bit more specifically like high fantasy, which is not something I was writing at the time. So I found it a little less helpful, but I still, especially if you're writing high fantasy, I think it would be really good. It's like a great course. It just wasn't applicable to me as much. I loved some of the poets' masterclasses as well. I don't think I watched any of them all the way through, but just hearing them talk about language, I think one of the things that has been really helpful for me as a writer is kind of spending more time reading and learning about poetry, because poets do such a great job at doing succinct, really powerful and impactful metaphors and description. And I think that if you are comfortable with that, it translates into better prose. The next thing is actually how I got like a lot of my writing done. For me, I found kind of the best way to get words on the page in my initial drafts was to do it in writing sprints. So a common method for this is like the Pomodoro method, where you will work focused for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. I typically worked on a modification of that. But beyond that, one thing that I absolutely loved, and the way I got the most words in the shortest amount of time, was watching live writing sprints. So essentially what these are, authors will get on YouTube or Twitch and live stream themselves like sitting there writing, and like do that same like on and then break, on and then break. I have a few people that are favorites. You can almost always, like, if you go to YouTube and go in the search and you like specify live and you like put in writing, there's almost always someone live writing. But I found I really worked best when I had someone whose style meshed with mine. I prefer kind of like 20 to 30 minute long sprints followed by like 10-minute long breaks. I tend to get a lot done in those 20 minutes, and then I do need like 10 minutes to like get my brain back up and going. So I found those really helpful. 3 of my favorite people that do writing sprints. One is Kate Kavanaugh. She tends to do sprints that range like really widely. She'll do like sprints that go anywhere from like 5 minutes to like an hour and a half. And like 72 minutes is no longer a sprint. Now you're just like sitting and working. And for me, that doesn't have like the motivation that a writing sprint has. But she does live stream on Twitch like 4 days a week. So I will often like tune into her if I have some time midday that I'm looking to write, just because she will be there. So she's a great resource and I like enjoy her. It's just like the lengths don't always vibe with me. My second favorite is Alexa Dunn. I actually, if Alexa live streamed more, she probably would be my favorite. I love her live streams because she does like 20, 25, 30-minute sprints, which is perfect. That's what I'm looking for. And then in between, she always has people on with her, and they will talk about like publishing and writing. And so it's kind of like advice mixed in with the writing sprints. And so I just find them really beneficial. And then my favorite is The Courtney Project. She is an independent author. She self-publishes with another woman. They have like a writing team, and they write under the name Kennedy Fox, and they produce like 8 books a year. It's insane. And so she will kind of do live streams like every single day for like a couple weeks, and then you won't see her again for like 6 weeks because she's like doing the first draft of a book, and then during editing and like all of the stuff that comes after, she's normally not live streaming. But during those 2 weeks, I always get a ton written because her live streams are like perfect. It's always like 20, 25, or 30-minute sprints, and then like nice breaks where she's like chatty. I really like her personality. She's my personal favorite. Third thing that I found was crucial was reading. I read 150 books last year, really intentionally. Read like a heinous amount of books. 150 books is like a ridiculous amount of books. But I wanted to make sure I was reading in excess in not only my genre, but all of the genres. I wanted to be reading poetry. I wanted to be reading things that were on the New York Times bestseller. I wanted to be reading self-published things. I wanted to be reading things that I really enjoyed, things that I didn't enjoy. I just wanted to be reading and consuming things for a couple reasons. One, I wanted to make sure I was really comfortable with what the market looked like and kind of what is selling right now. Two, I think for me, I am a pantser, so I do not do a lot of plotting before I write my stories. I normally have a couple key scenes that I know are going to happen in my head, but I don't have the whole story plotted out. I did plot Haunt Me Then a little bit, but when I say a little bit, I mean like a tiny bit. Like I was in an Excel sheet where I had, because Haunt Me Then is told from 2 timelines, where I had both timelines, and mostly it was just so I like could match up major events. I don't even think I filled in every chapter, because essentially each like cell was a like chapter, and I didn't fill it out every chapter, and the chapters I did fill out would be like 3 words. I would be like haunting, like very vague. So for me, it's really important that when I'm writing, I have a good sense of what should be coming next. And so for me, reading a lot of books helped me kind of hone that instinct to know like, okay, I need a scene to kind of like give the reader a rest here, or we're losing a lot of tension. I need to kind of amp up the stakes with something else. I need to explain this earlier. Just kind of those things that you pick up when you read a lot. You pick up like the patterns and rhythms that happen in books regularly. One specific thing I did that really helped was after I wrote my first novel, which has not sold. We haven't tried to sell it, but after I finished my first novel, after the first draft, I knew it was legitimately terrible. And so what I did was I took a couple books that were like similar in like genre or theme, and I like broke down the entire book. I did essentially like an outline from the completed book and like marked out, again in an Excel spreadsheet. This one was like much more elaborate though. I had like every single subplot had a column. I had like what percentage we were in, like what happened in the scene, what characters were involved, where were they, what time period was it, because I wanted to see kind of how these books that I adored worked and why do they function so well. And that was something that was incredibly helpful for me in helping me figure out kind of the pacing of a novel and of a book. There are a lot of like beat sheets that you can find on the internet that will kind of show you how a book should be broken down, but for me it was incredibly helpful to kind of do it myself and figure out what works for me as a reader. I also would do it on a scene-by-scene basis. So I remember in my first novel, I had like an action scene that I was like having a really hard time putting together. And so I took an action scene from one of my favorite books And I literally put them side by side and I said, okay, here we have dialogue. These are how many sentences does she have of like action? How much is description? Like really breaking down like how do I make a scene compelling on the like scene sentence by sentence paragraph level. And that was also really helpful for me. I think because I felt like I didn't have any formal training, I felt like I needed to kind of like give myself some training and some homework. And so that was one of the things I did. And I did find it super helpful. It was a lot of work, but it really taught me a lot about structure and writing and what things should look like. Number 4 is similar to the last one, but has a key difference, and that is reading writer's work. And like you were like, Michelle, last time we were reading writer's works too. But what I'm talking about specifically is reading unpolished writer's work. So for me, I accepted almost any opportunity to beta read. If I saw a story that was looking for beta readers and I had time, which normally I did, and it was something that I felt like I would be interested in. So I read a lot of romance, even though I'm not writing romance. I did a little bit of science fiction, even though I'm not writing science fiction. I did some urban fantasy. I had some regular fantasy, and I think I beta read like 5 or 6 stories over the last 6 months, and I find that process to be so helpful. One of the things I struggled the most with when I was writing in this kind of earlier stages was figuring out how to go from a first draft to like later drafts, like how to do like deep developmental revision. The advice you'll hear all the time is like, your first draft is supposed to be bad, like write your bad first draft and then you can polish it later. I was like, great, I have this bad first draft. I don't know how to get it to better. And I had a hard time finding a lot of resources on that. A lot of it was like, find what is not working in your story and then fix it. And I'm like, okay, well, if I knew what was going wrong and how to fix it, I would have done it, you know? So I had a lot of trouble there. And beta reading and reading other authors' unfinished work allowed me to kind of not have an emotional connection to a work and see where common mistakes were happening, where I'd be like, oh, I'm picking up that this person didn't develop this character, and so we don't understand their intention. And this person did do that really well, and I could kind of compare the two and be like, okay, I didn't develop my character. I can now see that, and now I can see how to fix that, if that makes sense. I think the more you're able to kind of read and use that critical brain on other people's work, it makes it easier to go back to your work, because your work is always going to be harder to see the flaws clearly in. Also, I did have some beta readers read my stuff, which is always incredibly helpful because they will see things that you will not see because you know the whole story in your head. But I needed someone to like point out where things are like not making sense because I haven't given the background. Where I found these, I think people sometimes get like hung up on this stuff. I did was a couple places. I got into a writer Facebook group that was incredibly helpful. That's where I found kind of my first couple manuscript exchange partners, buddies, and then I also the bulk of them came from, I applied for this program called Author Mentor Match. I did not make it in, which is for the best because things started happening with my book very rapidly and that would have messed up that whole process. But they did put all of us together into a Discord group, or you could join this Discord group, and I found a ton of people through that. I think there are a lot of like online resources if you go to social media, if you are looking for, especially if you are looking to read other people's work. Most of the time people are looking for you to read their work. And so if like that's what you're after, you shouldn't have too hard of a time finding someone who wants you to read for them. Because like having a good reader is great. The last thing that was crucial, and the other 4 were helpful in like helping me grow, but weren't necessarily necessary, except maybe the reading. I do think I would have needed to read some books, maybe not 150, but like some books. This last one, I like truly do not believe I would have been able to finish the book without it, and that is like mental space and like allowing my brain to get bored. I did not realize how much this was a thing until I really started like writing and trying to get words down like every single day or most days. But for me, for every like hour I spend actively writing on the keyboard, I typically need about 2 hours of thinking time, which is a lot. I think that's probably more because I, again, don't outline ahead of time. So for the most part, I'm kind of planning the next day's writing, thinking one step ahead of where I'm at. I like to have kind of a plan for what I'm going to write before I sit down at the keyboard because it helps me write like a lot more efficiently. But when I say like 2 hours of like thinking. It's not like I'm sitting for 2 hours in a room staring at the wall. A lot of this thinking time is kind of like squeezed in between things, or happens like while I'm driving or while I'm washing dishes or like walking the dogs. But I do have to be like really cognizant of carving it out, because it is so easy to take those like minutes of mental downtime and go on your phone and like scroll on social media or listen to a podcast or like fill that white space with something. So for me, one of the biggest thing I probably did was I cut out podcasts, and this was something that kind of happened during the pandemic organically, and then I just have never brought them back in. So I used to listen to podcasts when I was cooking, washing dishes, driving, walking my dogs, like working out, like all of those times. And now I occasionally will listen to a podcast when I'm like working out or while I'm cooking, but it's a lot more sporadic. I really try to, on the day-to-day, listen to music instead, or listen to like nothing, because that is some of the most crucial time in allowing me to kind of develop and grow the ideas that turn themselves into my novels. Other things I do to kind of cultivate brain space is I love doing puzzles. I have a puzzle app on my iPad, and I will sit there and play my puzzle app on my iPad while my brain thinks about novels. And I feel like I'm a little bit of a loser when I like admit that, but I love it. Sometimes I'll also listen to audiobooks while doing puzzles, and like truly I cannot think of a more de-stressing activity than sitting there with an audiobook doing a puzzle on my iPad. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I do love something that kind of half distracts my brain. So I love an iPhone game. Like, catch me playing Candy Crush all day long, because Candy Crush takes enough of my brain where I don't know, I like need to be like doing two things. I can't just sit and stare at the wall. This one is the weirdest one, but it's crucial. I also will read books that are incredibly simplistic in their plots, mostly romance books, and because they're so predictable and like so simple, I'm able to send half of my brain to think about my book. It like sounds weird when I explain it out loud, but it like truly is how I get a lot of thinking done. Again, I love a KU romance. A lot of them are like pretty simple, like pretty predictable. You know what's going to happen. Does that mean I'm going to have a bad time? No, absolutely not. Predictable doesn't mean bad. So while my eyeballs and half my brain is reading this book, my other half is thinking about my novel. The other time that I really spend a lot of time thinking about my novel is when I am lying in bed before I go to sleep and when I wake up in the morning. I feel like if I fall asleep while thinking about my story, then like my subconscious works on it while I'm sleeping. Is that true? I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I feel like it works. I also am like, this is like so bad, and I know it's so bad. It's a bad habit, but it's an important habit for me. When my alarm goes off in the morning, I like to lay in bed for another 30 minutes to an hour. I will structure my day. I like am very lucky that I don't need to wake up early to go to my job, but I will structure my day so I can lay in bed for up to an hour. Sometimes I read some of those cheesy romance books. Sometimes I play, games on my phone. Sometimes I just lay in bed and think about it. But I get like a lot done in that 30 minutes, an hour if we're lucky. And it's a luxury I would not trade. That is all I have for you. Those are 5 of the things that really helped me to write my novel. Hopefully those provide some help and inspiration for you. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to leave them down below. Subscribe if you're interested in more book content. I will be doing writing videos here and there, but mostly book stuff. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.